All my life, I've often heard that poverty is a choice, a product of bad choices, laziness, a lack of ambition, the wrong mindset, not being smart enough, skipping college, staying in the wrong neighborhood, not trying hard enough, not being fast enough to join the moving train. It's always not enough. It isn't about effort, but about design. Systems have stacked odds before a child takes their first breath, then blame them for losing the game. Today's video is different. You won't have to watch a video essay. Instead, you follow a single life, one child, no name, no face, just a quiet descent built from real-world politics, practices, and patterns that stretch across millions. You might think this story is fiction, but by the end, you will understand. It's just the world we live in, viewed through one life and a slow collapse. But by the end, you might recognize the world they were born into, and they might actually be you. He is just a child, not yet old enough to understand the weight of the world pressing down on him, but heavy enough that it shapes the ground beneath his feet. He was born into the hum of a tired, concrete, cracked neighborhood, where windows stayed shut to keep out sirens, smoke, and the sound of someone else's sorrows. The air he breathes is thick with the invisible weight of pollution. The water that fills his glass carries stories of neglect. Infrastructure crumbles around him, and every cough, every ache chips away at the fragile promise of health and learning. He entered classrooms that whispered failure, where the walls whisper stories of neglect. He sits with outdated textbooks, pages curled and yellowed. His teacher works twice as hard for half the pay, carrying the burden of too many children and too few resources. But he listened, tried to believe learning was the way out, but the lights would flicker, the ceiling leaked, computers were rare, counselors rarer, and college? That was a word spoken like a fairy tale, just out of reach, just believable enough to hurt. The schools in his neighborhood are this way because the system decides he isn't worth the investment. At home, the story is no simpler. Without affordable childcare, his parents juggle endless shifts and broken rest, torn between earning a living and simply being there. The hours they lose are the moments he loses, those quiet, steady moments that build the foundation of a childhood. His mother worked double shifts when she could, and when she couldn't, she rationed her worry like food. There was no one to watch his younger sister, so sometimes he did. He learned to feed her, calm her, distract her from the hunger, long before he ever learned multiplication. His childhood was not delayed. It was spent holding the weight of a family before his back had grown strong enough to bear it. And yet, he still woke up, still went to school, still imagined a version of himself in a cap and gown. But this is how the trap is built, not with cruelty, with neglect, with opportunity dangled like a carrot over an unreachable wall. And poverty does not just steal money, it rewires the mind. When you grow up measuring every meal, every bus fare, every pair of shoes, your brain stops planning for forever and starts surviving for today. His mind, shaped by scarcity and fear, learns early how to brace for loss, warping decisions, dulling confidence, tightening the grip of doubt. This is his world now, and it is just the beginning. 17 when he first heard the word opportunity spoken like a promise. Not in his neighborhood, of course. Words like that floated in from television screens, whispered through guidance counselor brochures, or dangled from the mouths of guest speakers who never stayed long. Still, he clung to it. A future, they said, could be bought with a college degree. He calculates in silence. Application fees, entrance exams, tuition, housing, books, transportation. He stacks the numbers in his head like a house of cards. Each cost another tremor that could bring it all down. He watches others prepare for college, some of them barely passing, wear legacy sweatshirts and speak casually of dorms they've never seen but already belong to. Their parents will write the checks, make the calls, pull the strings. He reads about scandals, donors bribing their way in, and he wonders how much of merit is performance, how much of success is just inheritance wearing a new face. His school counselor tells him to apply anyway. There's always financial aid, but no one explains how debt lingers longer than a degree ever shines. So he enrolled and let student loans fill the gap left by a family that had nothing to give but encouragement. The institutions welcomed him with open arms, but once inside, he found silence, couldn't afford rest when exhaustion blurred his vision. So he smiled and told no one how close he was to vanishing. Each semester, he recalculated the cost of dreaming. He cut meals in half. He dropped classes to work longer shifts. Sometimes he even works nights, then attends class in the morning. He buys used books, sometimes missing pages, but it's all he can afford. Every solution came at a cost. Each compromise a quiet scream into a system that never echoed back. Still, he pressed on, mistaking resilience for progress. Every decision, a gamble between survival and hope. He doesn't speak of the future with certainty anymore. Sometimes, between classes, he watched others, watched how easily some lives unfold, how connections made over dinner parties unlock jobs, how doors open when your last name holds weight, how unshaken their hands were, because they weren't carrying anything. He hears others joke about how college doesn't even matter, but it only doesn't matter when your father owns a company or when your last name opens doors before you do. He graduates, paper in hand, cap in the air, camera flash, catching the curve of his cautious smile. The room cheers, but his mind hums quieter. Behind the ceremony, behind the clapping, he already knows what waits on the other side. By the time he graduated, he owed more than $50,000. The degree came with no guarantees, just more competition. Meanwhile, others walked into family businesses, handed opportunities like heirlooms. They started debt-free, while he started already tied up. He was told education would be his escape, but instead it became another trap, wrapped in aspiration, sealed with debt. The loan letters arrive before the job offers do. Still, he keeps going. After college, he moved back home, not by choice, not to rest, just to pause for breath and some direction. But his presence became a weight his family couldn't carry, and maybe worse, he couldn't bear seeing them. So he left, rented a single room, no kitchen, barely a window, and called it independence. His mornings begin with job applications, resumes tailored, tweaked, then reshaped again, hundreds sent, mostly ignored. The few responses he gets lead to group interviews in cold conference rooms where they ask him about passion, for customer service, for fast-paced environments, for corporate culture. He smiles, nods, folds himself into the script. Entry level required experience. Experience required unpaid labor. Unpaid labor was a luxury he could never afford. And even his inbox filled with rejections signed by algorithms. He looks around and sees classmates from wealthier families easing into salaried roles, apartments co-signed by parents, jobs they got through family friends or polished networks. He's told he needs experience, so he works part-time gigs that don't cover rent. He freelances, he interns, he grinds. The grind becomes his gospel. The student loan emails begin as whispers. Grace periods end, balances grow. The numbers don't feel real until they do. Every monthly payment echoed louder than the diploma on the wall. Interest compounds like time. By 24, he's juggling 3 jobs. One pays hourly, one by task, one by tip. None offer health insurance. His college degree gathers dust in a frame on the wall above his mattress, a cruel decoration. At 27, he gets a full-time offer. It pays less than his student loans, but it has a title. He takes it. He starts to understand that for some, a diploma is a bridge. For others, it's a receipt. They told him higher education was the ladder out, but they didn't mention that the steps are farther apart for some. One night, hunched over spreadsheets he can barely focus on, he wonders if he failed, if maybe he didn't try hard enough, if maybe all of this is his fault. He turns off the screen and stares at the ceiling. The weight of his debt, his hours, his invisible labor, none of it fits the promise he was sold. He sees others like him now, degrees clutched like lifebuoys in a storm that doesn't care who can swim. He closes his eyes. He feels the lie breathing all around him because he did everything they said he should. Finally, he understands he has been moved through a system that monetized his hope. That took his ambition and packaged it as debt. That handed him a map and hid the real terrain. Rent goes up. It always does. The landlord says it's the market. Everyone wants to live here now. Not people like him. People who say the neighborhood is up and coming, as if it wasn't already full of lives in progress. Mail piles up. Eviction notices. Collection letters. Disconnection warnings. A slow erosion of peace. He tries to build something permanent, but the foundation is always shifting beneath him. And when the new buildings rise, when the art galleries come, when the rents double overnight, he is asked to move farther from opportunity, from work, from hope. So he moves and he signs the lease with hands hardened by labor. The new landlord doesn't care about his credit score, only that he has the deposit and maybe something extra in cash. Rent takes more than half of what he makes. The neighborhoods he can afford to live are the same ones his parents once struggled in. He spends hours on buses that never arrive on time. There is no time to rest, only time to move. The neighborhoods are mapped by exclusion and poverty. Here, landlords ask no questions, because they already know this is where people like him land. Redlining is never spoken, but it shapes the air. The buildings lean, the water smells, the lights flicker. There are no banks here, no clinics, but there are pawn shops, check cashing windows, and police cars that idle without purpose. He walks past them with his hands visible, head down, always aware. The smallest wrong moment, a name that matches, a glance misread, could strip away what little he has. A single arrest, even without conviction, is enough to unravel housing applications, job offers, and hope. And once it falls, it doesn't rebuild. He doesn't vote. Not because he doesn't care, but because no one's ever come to this side of the city offering more than a promise. The voting lines are long, the ID laws confusing, and when you live paycheck to paycheck, democracy becomes a luxury. You can't afford to stand in line. Survival leaves no space for civic duty. He tries not to think politically. After all, there's no room for ideals when the fridge is empty. Elections come and go, like weather. He knows the people in power don't see him. And worse, they don't even have to.
They don't care about us.
He had always thought he'd stay alone, not out of choice, because poverty shrinks your world until even love feels like a risk you can't afford. Relationships are not built on dreams where he comes from. They're built on survival, on the practical need to share rent, to split burdens, to not face the dark alone. Marriage came not with romance, but with quiet resignation, expectations. Everyone said it was time, that a man is supposed to build a family even if the foundation is cracked. So he did, and when the wedding ended, the bills didn't. They doubled. Marriage is different when you're poor. Every conversation bends toward logistics. Every disagreement ends with money. There's no room for softness. Children came next, not planned, but expected. And no one teaches you how to carry a family when you've never seen it done right. He tries and tries again, and still the center buckles. Rent climbs, groceries shrink. The cost of everything, money, time, affection, rises faster than he can stretch himself, until intimacy becomes a silence they don't talk about. And fatherhood, like everything else, came with weight. He wakes up earlier now, sleep even less. He counts meals instead of milestones, watches his child grow up inside the same apartment, on the same streets, under the same ceilings he once tried to escape. Sometimes he thinks about how it started. Just one man trying to survive. And now, survival is a group project. His family depends on him, but he depends on nothing. In the quiet, he wonders if it would have been different, if someone had paused the train long enough for him to step on. If opportunity hadn't been something you had to inherit, would it have been different? He wonders, but not often, as he tries to shield his children from it, from reality. But the cycle is subtle. It doesn't arrive with sirens. It seeps in through absence, stress, raised voices, unpaid bills, missed school events, neighborhoods with broken swings and sirens at night. It teaches without speaking. And when he sees his child sitting quietly with the same homework he once struggled through, he feels the shape of the circle, not theoretical, not poetic, just real, repeating. Another child, growing up with the weight of what came before, and so it continues. Not a straight line, not a spiral, a circle, unbroken, unpaused. This is not a story of failure. This is the architecture of poverty, designed to sustain itself. The world will say he didn't try hard enough, but they refuse to see how much effort it takes just to stand still in a place designed to pull you under. The truth is, some children are born lucky. Others are born into a war zone. Only theirs have no bullets, just empty cupboards and unpaid bills. We like to believe the world is fair. We want to think that if someone is poor, it's because they made bad decisions. As much as that is true for some, you cannot blame someone for losing a game they were never allowed to play. We say poverty is a choice, but what choice does a child have, born to parents already in neighborhoods stripped of opportunity? What decision do they make at 5 years old to deserve the ceiling caving in on their future? We lift up the exceptions, those rare few who clawed their way out of the mud, and call them proof that the system works. But they are not proof. They are outliers. And a system that only works for the lucky few is not a working system. We use their stories to silence the cries of the millions still trapped in the cycle. It's easier to believe poverty is a personal failure than to accept that it's a structural one. It's easier to believe it won't happen to you. But this is not just one boy's story. It's the story of millions, born behind the starting line. And for some of you watching this, it's yours. And for some reason, we look at them and still ask, why haven't you caught up yet? This is a reminder that poverty is not a choice. It is a cage, welded shut by history, policy, geography, trauma, race, and luck. And for many, it is inherited like a last name. This is not a story of despair either. It's a warning, because the cycle hasn't ended. It's passed down like debt, like a curse. And unless something changes, it will continue. Next year, next decade, next generation. So the next time someone tells you poverty is a choice, ask them, whose choice was it? The child's, the parents', the unborn? Ask them why they believe the success of a few justifies the suffering of the many. Ask them why they confuse survival with proof of a fair system. Ask them who the system really serves. Silence is loud. Listen closely and you'll hear it. The sound of the circle still spinning, and the quiet, aching knowledge that something must be done, even if today nothing